right, and coming in at number 94 with 57 points, we have Matt Hardy. And JC had him on his list at 100, and I had him on my list at 45. So the reason that I had Matt Hardy so high on my list was because he was becoming a single star. He was transitioning out of the tag team division and he was transitioning into a singles run as I was like at the peak of my fandom. And everything that Matt Hardy was doing with the Matt Hardy version 1, that is one of my top 5. I feel like that's a top 10 gimmick for me. The all of the little nuggets that they used to leave with the Matt facts on the lower thirds and everything, they're so good. And then it transitions into his feud with Edge after, Lita cheated on him with Edge, and then that spilled over into real life. That feud is so iconic. Everyone talks about that. The love triangle feud. It's so good. And then, just another reason that I had Matt Hardy is for everything that he did post WWE too. Whenever he was in TNA, they got really weird with that broken gimmick. And that broken gimmick is something that is like, it's legendary at this point. Yes. And like the cinematic matches, that full character arc that he kind of created fully on his own, that only somebody like Matt Hardy can do, is fantastic. And he eventually comes back to WWE with Jeff, and then they do the tags again, and now he's been in AEW where he's still doing single stuff. Now, granted, it's not the greatest of work. I will be right up front with you on that. It's not the greatest work, but brother's still out there making towns, putting in the time. And I love Matt Hardy. I feel like he is the forgotten brother that that deserves to get his flowers. And I always felt that Jeff was the high flying, flashy one of the bunch, but Matt was the technical wrestler behind it all. That he was the one that made the sausage at the end of the day. So that's pretty much why I have Matt so high on my list. I love Matt. But yeah, so I don't know what you got for Matt, JC, but takes away.
So to me, his biggest impact is the innovation.
Yeah.
Right. He was the brains behind the Hardys. He was more of the mind of what's going on in the match than Jeff might have been. But if you look at his own, singles runs, he's always been well respected. And so I'm just looking here at some of the titles. First of all, he's a Maryland Championship Wrestling alum.
Yeah.
So big shout out to Maryland Championship Wrestling and their one-time heavyweight champion, Matt Hardy. But he
also owned his own promotion at one point too. Like, let's not forget about that.
Yeah. And again, it's WWE ECW, but he was the ECW heavyweight champion.
Mm-hmm.
He had some mid-card belts and things like that. He had a good run in TNA, twice as the world heavyweight champion. But I think honestly the biggest thing is the cinematic stuff is where I think of him. I mean, obviously we're not talking about tag teams because that's a different stratosphere for him and Jeff. But as a singles guy, I think a lot about that, and I think about when he came into AEW. I mean, his introduction into AEW, it was the pandemic, but he was brought in as a big deal, right? And he was thrust into, at the time, while they didn't have a lot of storylines because they didn't have a lot of people, but he was brought in as, with the highest level storyline. He was brought in at the same time as Brody, that sort of stuff. So, and I think now, more than anything, he's giving back. He's helping out the young guys. When you see him, he's out with the young guys. He's working in the back with them, that sort of thing. So to me, he's not one of those guys who's solely based on in-ring work because, I mean, he's not the greatest worker but you look at the mind of Matt Hardy and what he's accomplished and what he's been able to put out there that's creative and innovative, and the overall legacy and impact that he'll have. That's why he made my top 1.
The one thing I wanted to say about the tag, I know we're not really talking about tag teams, but I want to say one thing is it's a testament to him. Those guys literally started out as small vanilla jobbers in that tag team scene on like Saturday mornings and would get annihilated. And they wowed themselves into a career by just showing how much they had innovation wise and just being so creative. I mean, you got to give them a lot of credit for that, man. Because they kind of broke the mold at that point coming in as a tag team. So the one match I had written down was the Slammiversary 2016 match, which is on YouTube. It's him versus brother, him versus Jeff. It's two brothers that are out there loving what they're doing, killing each other, big bumps, ladders and tables, everything you'd expect. So if you're looking for a singles match to check out, the Slammiversary 2016 versus Jeff is on YouTube.
And for me, I actually think, to piggyback off of what JC said before, the one thing that sort of got in the way with him being a pseudo Jericho, in that you are this big name that's there to elevate everybody else, was that Sammy Guevara feud. Man, nobody wanted to lose to Sammy Guevara more than Matt Hardy. That was all that he wanted to do. He would get on the microphone and say, "Sammy, you're so good," blah, blah, blah. And then, Sammy knocked him out cold as ice. And then, Reby lost her mind on social media when that happened. And then he got another concussion, right? Was it 2 concussions in 2 Sammy matches? Yeah. And so that was just so snake, but I just really felt terrible because, just like JC said, man, is that he came in and he was with the Elite in that Stadium Stampede match versus the Inner Circle, which was the biggest feud that company had. And that match that's the best match of 2020. I know that there's better wrestling matches, but that match, for what it was in the time frame that it was filmed and everything else, I watched that match with Brix Malone and Slovak Ibushi, and Slovak Ibushi watches no wrestling, and we were high-fiving each other and laughing and everything for 45 minutes. And then I showed that to my father-in-law, and we were high-fiving each other. Just like, that match was so perfect. And they picked Matt Hardy for that, for a specific reason. Like when he was going into the dunk tank and coming out as different iterations of himself, like that stuff's so good, man. It really is. And then what ended up happening was, I think that he sort of, got his legs cut off from under him when every time that he wrestled Sammy Guevara, he would get absolutely injured. And I think that for his own good, that they were like, Matt, like, we can't put you in high profile places because we want you to see 60. You know what I mean? Like, I think that was where that came from. And it stinks for him because, then he was in a much more reserved role. But just be ready for Hardy's versus Edge and Christian. Probably sometime around the New Year's Revolution show or whatever that's called.
Mm-hmm.
Hope so.
The last thing I'll say about Hardy before we move on is because of his ideas and innovations, especially with the cinematic match, and you guys will appreciate this, he's the reason The Undertaker finally retired. He did, because of his matches and his ideas, they finally found a way to put a nice bow on the Taker and end it. So we should all give Matt Hardy a big round of applause for retiring The Undertaker. I know you guys don't like it. So.
Taker's over huge in this house, man.
Well, we love Taker.